pick some winners and then we say, let's go. So come on. It's time to watch the show. We're talking hardball. Ken Griffey's grotesquely swollen jaw.
Happy Monday to everyone. Welcome into a live edition of Betting Weekly Hardball. I am Doug Kezirian alongside Albert Nguyen, also known as Analytics Capper. And no case of the Mondays here. Albert, last time we were on the Betting Weekly umbrella, Bet Rivers Network, we were red hot in the WNBA. Let's hope to stay that way as we look at the Diamond today.
Yeah, I'm excited. Yeah, that was the first time I introduced you to my trifecta with the Seattle Storm. So that was nice. I'm looking forward to the Diamond today. Like you said, there's 13 games tonight, so almost a full slate.
Yeah, it's some interesting matchups. We only got a few weeks to go in the regular season. So some compelling storylines. We know about the Dodgers and Padres tied now, top the NL West after they wrapped up their weekend series. So a lot of interesting stuff across the way. Also, just want to remind you, if you like what you hear on our shows, sign up for the newsletter, get exclusive tips, and the free Insider magazine. Sign up for free at bettingweeklystudios.com. And certainly some great stuff, especially with tennis going on, the U.S. Open in the Northeast. So really fun time of year for sports fans because we have college football and we have NFL around the corner. So everything going on. And there's tons of other shows. You got to check them out. Top of the hour, Betting Weekly Fast Break. I'll be on with Sarah as we'll break down both WNBA games and the home stretch in that season as well. So 3 weeks to go in the W. A lot of interesting futures adjustments, whether it be MVP or adjusted season win totals. I was scrutinizing this weekend. So I love that the Bet Rivers odds makers are continue to formulate all that and even adjust on the fly. But we're talking baseball. And I want to start with the Phillies and Mets because we have a great pitching matchup. So the Mets trail the Phillies by 7 games in the National League East. They have 7 remaining meetings. 3-game series begins tonight in Queens. Senga going for New York. And then Sanchez going for the Phillies. And he's been lights out, even getting a little buzz, in the Cy Young conversation when Skeens got touched up a little bit, although he was fantastic yesterday. Phillies road chalk $1.30. Over under 8 with the under juiced. I want to pull the trigger on Christopher Sanchez. The Mets, I was on them both Saturday and Sunday. They got there in a rocking chair win on Saturday, not so much yesterday, blew a late game. I'm leaning hard to the Phillies. What about you?
I'm actually leaning hard the other way. I know Senga last time out didn't have the greatest of starts. So it's 2 pitchers kind of moving in opposite directions. And me being a contrarian at heart, I kind of like the Mets here. They've been struggling. I think they're only 5-5 in their last 10. You mentioned it, 7 games behind the Phillies, who are just playing great baseball. They're 7-3 in their last 10, and that's pretty much their win percentage all year long. They're sitting at 76-54. They are one of the best hitting teams with Schwarber now. They're one of the clutchest teams at the end of games. So it's really hard to put this team away. So it's scary for me to say I lean the Mets as a short, underdog at home. But that's my initial reaction to it. And as I dive into the numbers, I think it could be a bounce back opportunity for Senga. But we'll find out early on just because that Phillies lineup is so potent.
I guess I want to dive deeper into the contrarian concept because I've known you for a while, but our audience maybe not as much. And I guess what I'm saying is a lot of times you can interpret the market as holding firm on something or moving a different way. But that's really the money, the respected money, not just the volume, but the respected money dictating things. And contrarian can only go so far, right? It's really could be just a couple people keeping the Mets at value at plus 110. That's why I went to 105 or whatever it may be. So it's not necessarily a no-brainer winner. And so how would you kind of best explain the contrarian concept with a baseball money line?
Yeah, I would say there's a few principles when it comes to baseball, and I'll be completely transparent with you guys. It doesn't mean it's a foolproof, principle, a foolproof strategy moving forward. Just because the contrarian mindset is what I abide by doesn't mean everybody else has to. But I would say that it depends on the situation. In this case, I do know the Mets have been struggling, right, for about a month. There's a lot of talk about how this from a payroll standpoint and how much they're how many superstars and the names on this team, and they're playing at home and they're struggling to get these wins. They're coming off a loss as well. Like there's just a lot of negative news, not only from when you read the papers, Doug, but also when you look at the numbers, right? They're definitely batting worse than they were at the beginning of the season. They're definitely pitching worse than they were at the beginning of the season. You dive into advanced analytics, all of that kind of aligns with each other. And on the other side, the Phillies have just been steady all year long. Sure, they've gone up and down in terms of streaks, but they're sitting pretty. They are 7 games ahead of the Mets, and they're going into this game with a 2-game winning streak. They won both games, the last 2 games in Washington. So it's almost like 2 pitchers moving in opposite directions, 2 teams moving in opposite directions. And so it seems like it's a very easy read to do the Phillies. And the other thing that I'll look at is actually the price. Not only the respected money and the tickets and all that, but the price. There's a reason why the seven game leader here is very short favorite. I think that to me is a little telling. Again, this is just like innate in terms of how I read the lines. But I'll start with the lines, Doug, and then I'll affirm it or deconfirm it with numbers after that. But my initial read right now, short underdog here, lesser record. They've been struggling all year long, especially recently. I like the Mets.
Right. And I know Chris Macero's talked about a lot on the show, just how good the Phillies are at home. So on the road, different situation, different team. And obviously later in the season, I would imagine those records carry more weight, but they're only a couple games above 500. I just did the calculator while you were talking. $1.30 translates to 56.5%. So break even, if you simulate this matchup 10,000 times or whatever number you want to use, the Phillies break even point is 56.5%. So if you were to lay $1.30, you would be saying that I think the Phillies win this matchup again in a vacuum and with this money line, everything more than 56.5%. So that's something to sort of gut check and compare money lines to percentages. And that's sort of how it all comes out. Now, one thing that I'm not sure, Albert, if that's part of your equation, but City by the Bay really likes Mets over 3.5 runs team total, only minus 110. Sanchez nearly has a 4.00 ERA lifetime against the Mets. Sometimes that matters. Sometimes it doesn't. He's obviously got a unique style of pitching with his changeup. He's really a 2-pitch pitcher like Skubal. And Sunday Night Baseball a couple of weeks ago did a great breakdown of that. And the question is, maybe the Mets are just more prone or more inclined to decipher and be able to kind of handle that 2-pitch split, things like that. So a lot of it's matchup based, a lot of it's math, or a lot of it's random. And that's why betting baseball can be difficult.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of random to it, right? Because there's so many numbers, because of the Moneyball's age or era now that, you can get lost in some of the numbers. And what's the most important number at the end of the day is wins and losses and how they do after a win or how they do after a loss. So the comment, basically backing the New York Mets offense who are coming off a game where they only manufactured 3 runs against a really bad Braves team. That started, I believe Elder started for the Braves yesterday. They had way more opportunities to score more than 3 runs. So the logical mindset or the regression there is they should be able to, get 3 and more than 3 people across the plate tonight. But obviously I'm going to lean that way as well, because if I'm on the Mets, if I'm going to lean the Mets, all the bets that are correlating towards that money line, I'm also going to be, lean or biased towards as well.
All right. Good breakdown across the board. So that's a 7-game lead for the Phillies. Things are a little tighter in the NL Central with the Brewers lead over the Cubs down to 5 games. Milwaukee just 3-6. And it's since that 14-game win streak. So they were storming out of the gates in August and they've cooled off a bit. But Woodruff on the bump at home as they host the Arizona Diamondbacks. The money line up to $1.77 for Milwaukee. And I like Woodruff a lot. I'm just a little apprehensive about laying this kind of lumber. And I think the D-backs lineup can be annoyingly persistent. Now that's usually at home, um, but the price feels right to me. I wouldn't get involved in the total because of the variance of Woodruff and how he can just throw gas. But how would you look at this?
Yeah, the Milwaukee Brewers finally came back down to earth, right? They won 13 games in a row, maybe even 14. They were the hottest team in baseball for about a month stretch there. But now looking at their 10-game recent history, which is, you know, Doug, I like to look at recent history. They're only 4-6, and the last time that Woodruff was out there, he ended up losing. Right, he was a favorite against the Cubs, -121 favorite. He only lasted 4 1/3 inning. That is not a good sign, in my opinion, for someone to back the Brewers. You know, you might be questioning, well, Albert, you talked about, you know, buying low or going contrarian. They've lost 2 straight. Woodruff has lost. But I also take into account like who they played. I also take into account like, okay, were those 4 1/3 innings, were they quality? Was he walking a ton of guys? Like he just didn't feel like he had his stuff. I mean, he had three walks in 4 innings, gave up 3 runs. And I would say on the other side, because I was on the Diamondbacks yesterday, personally, I was on the Diamondbacks yesterday. They were up 1-0, barely hanging on to that lead all game long. Until the very end, the bullpen came in and, you know, the Reds were able to get to them and they lost 6-1. I thought the Diamondbacks, even if I look at that game, were the right side. I should have done first 5 there because I like them first 5. I should have done first 5 in full game and, you know, go 1-1 and split there. But that's my way of saying I like Diamondbacks yesterday. So I don't like, you know, from a situational spot to fade them today because I just don't have the, you know, the same belief that, you know, bad luck is going to happen back-to-back games. Even though Arizona has been a very unlucky team all season long, they have a lot of talent. They were just in the World Series 2 seasons ago, but this has been a disappointing season, you know, treading water right around 500, 64, 67. But I do think they're kind of live today is what I'm saying.
All right. So yeah, live. And again, goes back to the math thing. You're looking at like 60% is what you need to break even point, maybe a little higher, 62%, something like that range. I don't want to do the calculator every time, but there is a way to convert that and sort of run it by your like eye test if you are just a recreational bettor, sort of processing things. Let's keep it out west, sort of, as we pivot to the international, or sorry, interleague play, I should say. Padres, who are now tied with the Dodgers, as I mentioned, they visit the Mariners in a cool West Coast interleague matchup. Mariners -124 with Bryce Miller on the bump and Sears going for the Padres. Now, Mariners opened up a can yesterday, but that was much different with Kirby on the bump than this situation. The M's, a lot of people thought would make a run, right, when they made the big acquisitions at the deadline, but they're 2 back of Seattle, so certainly within striking distance and then some. They've been limping of late, lost 7 of 10. Padres obviously did not get the sweep, but had a successful series against the Dodgers to pull within a tie of first place. Well, they took the lead and then lost it yesterday. So gosh, these are such big games, so intriguing. I lean Mariners just for that first game off the, Padres have to go on the road, an emotional high from the weekend, all that. Little flat, I think. I would take the M's or nothing here, but I don't trust their starter.
I actually agree with you there. I would also take Seattle or nothing at all here. No official play here. Nothing that is strong enough to meet my thresholds to make it a play. But this is a really cool series, right? San Diego down, in Southern California, and then Seattle up in Washington. I think it's a really cool experience for both, fan bases to go up against each other. And I know we haven't really talked about the futures market much when it comes to hardball, but I'm interested to see what the San Diego Seattle World Series matchup odds are like, because I do think both teams are candidates to buy low. Like, I think both teams have the talent, both teams have the pitching to really make a deep playoff run. And if they're peaking at the right time, it doesn't matter if you're in first place and you have home field advantage, or you barely limp in and you have to play on the road. Baseball is so 50-50, a lot of luck. I think Seattle and San Diego both have a legitimate shot to make the World Series, in my opinion.
So you're looking at one of them's plus 470 to win their pennant, and that's the Mariners, and the Padres are plus 600. So a quick calculation would be about 39-1 would be that matchup. And we've seen crazier ones. Obviously, a plus 470 and a plus 600 is nothing that outrageous, obviously, to line it up the same year, blah, blah, blah. But with the Rangers D-backs that year, I know guys with like 350, 400-1 tickets of just the matchup. You didn't need them to, one to win necessarily. It was just to get to the World Series. So leans to the home team there. We mentioned the Padres. Let's mention the Dodgers. Dodgers opening up a series with the Reds, who are continuing to play out west. Hunter Green going for Cincinnati, and he throws absolute gas. Have been lights out since he returned from injury. Dodgers are going with Emmett Sheehan. Now, this is the problem with LA of late. They've had shaky starting pitching, except for when some of their big guys go, and that's gotten the bullpen. And then the guys are not hitting. Yeah, Ohtani went yard, but that was in cruise control fashion. They have not come up with the big hit a lot. Now, Freeman's delivered a little bit lately. But this Dodgers team's really, I saw a stat, and I wish I screenshot it or something, but basically like something like since the All-Star break, Albert, the Dodgers have like the same horrible record as like the Rockies and some of these bad teams. They just have not been delivering. So yeah, while San Diego's finally starting to put it together and play better, the Dodgers have obviously been regressing and declining.
Yeah, their pitching is struggling, man. If you look at these two teams, the matchup tonight with the Reds and the Dodgers, the Cincinnati Reds actually give up less runs than the Dodgers. With all those big name arms, with all the big signings, in the offseason, the Dodgers, dealing with injuries, and even when they come back, they're just not the same. And Ohtani, last time he pitched, he was pretty much shelled. And so if you look at the Dodgers record, they're 74-57. Sounds pretty good, right? But if you were on the money line on the Dodgers this entire season for $100, you're down over $1,000. So that is not, and in terms of playing at expectations, below or above expectations, they are definitely below. And it's definitely been a recent thing. Like Doug mentioned, since the All-Star break, they've been really struggling, not only with their arms and pitching, but their big names at the top of the lineup are not getting it done. And, before the game last night where they, beat the Padres 8-2, they were only able to score 1 run in games 1 and 2 of that series. So it's really inconsistent. It's really hard to back a team every single time. You're going to pay $150, $175, $2 to back a team that's too inconsistent, in my opinion. I think the Reds are a team where the Dodgers don't want to see right now. If you're a struggling team, you don't want to see a team that is live with great arms and great talent. I would be worried if I were the Dodgers. If they don't turn it around quickly, I don't know what their projection or the forecast would be in the playoffs. But for this game in particular, I actually lean the Reds here. I think the Reds are, in my opinion, more of a motivated team. Like they're more of a hungry team, in my opinion, when I watch them body language wise.
I'm right there with you. That's where I lean with the Reds. Hunter Green is fantastic. Chris Massaro and I will be on the show next on Wednesday, and I think he and I need to do a discussion of whether or not we hedge our 18-1 on the Padres to win the NL West. I mean, I think that's a week ago or so. I thought we talked about it on the show. I forget who it was with, but they were minus 225, something like that, to win the division. Maybe it was 2 weeks ago, but at some point you maybe want to buy off that, and it's a good discussion for us to have, and hopefully, doesn't become a 2-game deficit for San Diego over the next 2 days before we chat on Wednesday. But yeah, I love Hunter Green. Dodgers do hit righties well, but he's exceptional. He's definitely a different cat, so to speak. I was looking at some props just because I don't want to worry about this Reds offense. I had him with Abbott pitching Saturday, and Abbott was terrible. Truly, truly terrible. So Green, I mean, you can get strikeouts over 6.5, outs over 17.5. That's 6 innings. The problem is if he gets his strikeouts up, he may not go super deep into the game. And that's been a problem, when you bet some of these props, the guys, the pitcher's almost too good. And he's been striking out too many guys. Therefore, the pitch count's going to go up. I mean, he had 12 in his last outing, did go into the 7th inning. But there's been times where, against the Brewers, he only threw 5 innings. Now, that was in June, but still the same concept because he had 7 Ks. So I would do the over for both, but don't want to force it. Maybe I come back to the Hunter Green prop. But let's check in on the American League here. Orioles hosting the Red Sox. We have the old Sunday night baseball travel, and that's Boston. Now, it's not a ton of distance as they're playing within the division, but it's something worth mentioning. Bernardino going for Boston, Sagano going for the O's. Baltimore was terrible the first half of the season, showing some signs of life of late, but not necessarily anything to write home about. I don't want to bet into this Sunday night baseball thing, but I would lean to the Red Sox if I had to take anything.
Yeah, I mean it's a good bounce back spot from a head-to-head matchup. If you look at these two teams matching up, Baltimore has won the last 4 games outright. You know, some I think one of those games they were a favorite, the other 3 they were dogs. So impressive stuff from a head-to-head matchup. They're at home. They have the lesser record at 60 and 70. Boston is still in that playoff hunt for the wild card. It makes sense that it's a Boston read for you, but I don't know. Like I'm not confident in Boston or the Yankees, to be honest. At spots 2 and 3 in that division, I think it's Toronto's right now to lose. But it does make sense to me that it's a Boston play, and they've been. I mean, a lot of these teams in the AL East, they've just been 5-5 baseball, right? In the last 10 games. So it's hard for me to project, oh, they're about to go on a streak, because once they win 1 or 2, then they lose 1 or 2. So it's hard as a bettor to get in a rhythm with either of these teams. So for me, it's a layoff for sure, but I do get why you're leaning Boston.
Well, it's a good point about the rhythm. I think that's the perfect word for this. I just think Boston's lineup is so much better now, and they're hitting with more confidence too. I mean, you bring the young guys like Anthony and some of the other bats. I just feel it's a more complete lineup, and the Orioles are just so shaky and volatile. Now, the reason I'm off the game is I just don't know what I'm getting with the pitchers. It's really straight gambling. Baltimore did avoid the sweep to Houston. But the Red Sox, I mean, I talked about it earlier with the Padres, right? That game going to Seattle was like the emotional high, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's same thing with the Red Sox, right? Big series against the Yanks. You get the Sunday night baseball thing, the angst in the crowd and everything. They avoid the sweep, do the Yanks. And I just think it's a little bit of a flat spot for Boston. And I prefer betting on them at home anyway. But that's my apprehension. Don't want to lay it with a pitcher who I just don't know what I'm going to get out of him. So we are contractually obligated to mention the Yankees game now that we've mentioned the Red Sox game, and they host the Nationals, who've been a little feisty of late. A little, I said. Lord going for them is last time he pitched, he really baffled New York's other baseball team, the Mets. And then Schlitter going for the Yanks, the youngster. Schlittler's been solid. Strikeouts have been up there as well. Big price, though, minus 250 against a Nats lineup that I think is decent. It's not as bad as you would think. They've lost back-to-back games, but I think they're a little dangerous. They're a little potent. And Lord, he doesn't strike out that many, but he's been pitching pretty effectively. I cannot lay 250 in this game, but I'm not ready to hop on the dog here either.
I actually would rather do the Nationals than the Yankees in this game. It might end up being an official play, by tonight, by first pitch, but I was on the Nationals yesterday against the Phillies. They were plus 220 in that game. They only lost by a run. They had bases loaded. They only manufactured 1 run out of that. If they got a hit, it would have been a tied ball game. But I actually like Washington moving forward. I think they are a very live young team that relishes the role of underdog and spoiler. So all these teams that they're facing, all these quote unquote elite teams that they're facing, they just went Phillies, Mets, Phillies, now Yankees. So they're playing great teams, and they're more than handling themselves. If you were to bet the money line on the Nationals in the last 10 games, even though they're 5-5 in that stretch, you're up 250, right? Because they're basically an underdog in every single game. And I think there's a lot of value with this team moving forward, because there's no way I'm going to lay minus 250 on the Yankees. I do think there's value here on the Nationals.
Yeah, that's the only side I would play. And if I suggested otherwise, my apologies. I'm glad you clarified your stance so I could jump in here. Although Adam Osimo thinks Schlittler under 5.5 strikeouts. He's saying that he will not be baffling this Nats lineup. And then Ron Burgundy, the proper picture in the avatar. The wind is out to right field strong. Washington is loaded. with left-handed bats or switch hitters. So maybe that 9 over-under is looking a little cheap as well, because the Yanks do find a way to get those shots to right. I know Stanton had one over the weekend where he slipped, his back foot slipped, and he was still able to get it out of the stadium. So a lot going on there. And the team totals, as City by the Bay points out, over on the Nats, over 3.5 is plus money. All right, you mentioned the Blue Jays. Quite the pitching matchup north of the border. Max Scherzer going for Toronto. Joe Ryan going for the Twins. So Minnesota people were surprised, including myself, that the Twins kept Ryan at the trade deadline after trading so many other guys. Scherzer's been pleasantly solid, since returning from injury. So that's a good omen. Bieber was great, and Adam the Bull was over his strikeouts. I think he got there in the third inning. So maybe the Blue Jays are shaping up to be a bet-on team, or at least maybe in the futures market. If Bieber is a former Cy Young Award winner, if he can pitch like this, man, it's tempting to get involved just because they have the bats. They might have home field advantage, right? And some of the arms look pretty impressive. Now, in this game, I'm not in a rush to lay 137 against Joe Ryan on the other side, but under would certainly be worth a look. I just feel it can get pretty dangerous with that Twins lineup. But, there's every number, everything has a price. So maybe that is the right approach.
Yeah, I got 2 official plays for you in this one, Doug. I do like the Blue Jays. So give me the favorite on the Blue Jays tonight. And then the other play at, 0.1 unit, I like the Blue Jays to actually win the American League. This is a team I really like. Super deep. When you look at their lineup, they can beat you on both the right side and left side, 1 through 9. And then, some of their veteran pitchers are going to be much more fresh than if they were, on their incumbent team without being traded. So I like this Blue Jays team. Plus 370 right there on the screen looks pretty enticing to me. And I think it's been it's funny because we talk about hockey in Toronto. The country of Canada hasn't hoisted a Stanley Cup in decades. And I think Toronto, they just won the NBA Finals a few years back. They're gonna, in my opinion, if they get to the World Series, I do like the American League. I know that's another bet people are interested in, American League versus National League. You don't have to pick the teams, but just the league. I like the AL to win this year. So if Toronto gets there, that's my pick. And so it would be funny for them to hoist every single trophy except for their, national sport in hockey.
At Bet Rivers, you can bet plus 123 on the American League. The National League, minus 150. And yes, the last team from Canada to win the Stanley Cup, 1993, the Montreal Canadiens against my LA Kings. It was heartbreaking with Gretzky. Kings won game 1. Game 2, they're winning. They get a late penalty because McSorley's stick is too curved too much against standard rules. Power play after the Canadians challenge. They tie it up, win in overtime, and they don't lose again. So the Kings were on the verge of going up 2-0 on the road, and then they lost 4-1. Painful, but Canadians haven't won since, so maybe karma. Who knows? Okay, so yeah, plus 370. I think it's the right time to strike with Shane Bieber joining that rotation. You mentioned all the other reasons to like Toronto. I don't really see too much intimidation elsewhere in the American League. Obviously, the Tigers lineup is pretty solid, and they have Skubal, who can wreak havoc in a series. And then out west, like Astros are the division leader right now. If they can get their starting pitching figured out with Valdez and just everyone else. So there's a lot to like with Toronto. I think that's a strong move. I would want a little more candy than the plus 370, but I'm with you there, at least with the thought process there. I mentioned Skubal. Well, he's on the bump tonight out west. Tigers visit the Athletics in Sacramento. JT Ginn going for the A's. Tigers, understandably, a big favorite here. Now, Skubal definitely showed some mortality in recent starts, but then he throws 7 shutout innings with 10 strikeouts in his last game. A fantastic performance and allowing just 3 hits at home against Houston. Again, now he's out west, a bit of a launching pad out there in NorCal. If it were any other stadium, I'd be looking to even lay the $2. I mean, A's just got pounded by the Mariners. So even though their lineup can have some pop occasionally, they're capable of getting wiped out. I just think it's a weird place to pitch, and I don't know if Skubal, he's been a little shaky in the last month, so I'm not in a rush to lay the $2.
Yeah, I would lean the over here, the full game over, not the team total, not, first five, but I think the full game here because I do think the starters are going to run through a little bit of trouble, but especially both bullpens. We know the Tigers have been great and they're beating up on the American League, right? They took 3 of 4 against the Twins. They swept the Astros. They took 2 of 3 against the Royals. Now they're playing the Athletics. They are definitely taking care of business against the American League. But I when I talked about the Nationals earlier, I think they're going to be a live team moving forward just because of their, explosive lineup. And I guess explosive is a little facetious, but they're very talented young lineup in Washington. It's very similar in Sacramento. The Athletics, you can make an argument, has the better lineup moving forward in the next 1 or 2 years, right? They're going to be a perfect team, once if and when they move to Las Vegas, that's going to be an exciting hitting team. And because of that, they're always going to be live. So I wouldn't back the Athletics just because of the Skubal factor, but I do think they're going to be able to get some runs across the board. And so that's why I lean the over here. I think both teams are going to be able to rake tonight.
All right, so maybe not a vintage Skubal performance. So you like the over here because the Tigers offense can certainly get going against Ginn, which would be not surprisingly if that happens. So over 9, at least a lean for you there. The Rangers were lights out with the pitching. This is kind of what we expected maybe from this team in the second half to make a run. And they only allowed 3 total runs against the Guardians in a 3-game sweep. They actually shut them out back-to-back games. And now they welcome the Angels, who just got twisted up by the Cubs with Horton going, who was fantastic. Rangers, really big favorites, though. I mean, but DeGrom's on the bump. Soriano counters for the Halos, but DeGrom has not been the same, and he's been actually touched up quite a bit the last few starts, except for the last one. So before that, he got touched up a little bit against Phillies and 5 earned against the Mariners, 5 earned against the Angels. So here he is facing the Angels again. I was on the Rangers in that game in Anaheim. This one in Arlington. 7.5 feels like a low total with Soriano on the bump, and the Rangers bats finally waking up. Do you have a read on this at all?
I do think DeGrom is going to do well tonight. You mentioned it. He gave up 5 and 5 against the Angels and Seattle's back-to-back. But after that, only 3 against the Phillies and only 0 against the Blue Jays. He also skipped his last start, so he should be a lot fresher. It's been 10 days since the last time he pitched. I would assume that he's going to have not a vintage DeGrom, but definitely an earlier of this season DeGrom performance, who was, really good. I think Nathan Eovaldi has been the best pitcher all season long, but at the peak, DeGrom, the first 2 months were, pretty much lights out. So I like the under in this game. Every Rangers game I'm going to look at the under first because I know their offense has been struggling. But now with their, quote unquote ace on the mound, it makes a lot of sense. So I lean the under here. I also lean the Rangers, but like you mentioned, it's way too expensive a price to pay for them.
And this goes back to the percentages I was touching on earlier, right? So you have a favorite of 182. Just, what you do to figure this out, you can Google it. So it's not trying to figure out math on the fly. But you do the minus money over, in this case, 182 plus 100. So it's 182 over 282. So quick math, if it's a minus $2 favorite like Skubal is, it's 200 over 300, 2/3, 67%. So you can go up and down off 67%. So this is probably like 63%. Something around there. I do think there's probably value on the Rangers, all things considered. Angels traveling, they've been eaten up by the Cubbies at home. And I don't know if this is a shot in the arm to get right. I don't think they're going to be itching for that. So that's, how I would play this. But that's just a lean for you. I'm going to make that official play with Hunter Green prop. I'm going to go over 17.5 outs recorded. So I need him to pitch 6 full innings at least, minus 121. That'll be my lone play. I feel a little dirty not having one. So had to add that as well. So I'm typing it into our sheets, minus 121. And I think I'm pretty good with that. I think Hunter Green's fantastic. He's really exciting to watch for sure.
Yeah.
Any other leans that you might want to convert into a play or anything like that? We've discussed a handful of games or a game I didn't mention that you want to touch on.
I'm gonna stick it with the Blue Jays. I do like them against Joe Ryan today. I mean, I also like the Rangers, but I'm just gonna keep it on the Blue Jays. Like you said, right? Sometimes the best bet is no bet at all. I think one official play, even though there's 13 games tonight, you'll see a lot of value, or you'll find a lot of spots once the games get started as well.
You know, Rays visit the Guardians. This game on FS1, so national television. Seymour going for Tampa. Bybee going for the Guardians, who I mentioned earlier were baffled by the Rangers shutout Saturday and Sunday. Do you think that's a good thing or bad thing if you want to bet on Cleveland? Like getting the heck out of town, don't have to worry about that Rangers spot. You can sort of wipe the slate clean. New week, new opponent, new series. Are you more inclined to think the Guardians kind of get back on track, or is this a funk that still lingers?
I think if the line was higher, if this was more expensive than minus 140, 150, then it would make me a little more confident, right? I think at that point, odds makers and bookmakers are expecting the Guardians to bounce back. They're at home now. They're away from Texas, like you said. But the fact that it's just such a short favorite spread, and these are two teams that are basically neck and neck, with each other. If you look into all the stats, not only from a record, but their batting average, their home runs, their hits, they're very, very similar. And it's not enough for me to be as confident in the Guardians. When I say, look at the line and kind of take a read there, the way that the lines are set does help me in terms of confidence level, right? If I like a team without looking at the lines, I'm just looking at the team's numbers and the team's advanced analytics against the other team without looking at the betting lines, and I make a decision and the betting lines reaffirm that really strongly, that's when I'm very, very confident in it. In this case, I haven't looked into the Guardians, deeply into the numbers yet. But if I were to lean the Guardians here, if I, put the two teams face to face, and I lean the Guardians in a vacuum, and then I put in the betting lines, and it's minus 125, minus 130, depending on what you're looking at, it doesn't instill enough confidence in me. So that's why I'm laying off.
All right, good stuff. And we should mention that Ron Burgundy in the chat says the game in Cleveland could rain out. Hey, Ron's delivering the news more ways than one. Isn't it Brick who usually does the weather? But we're going to have Burgundy give us the weather update. At least he's in charge of all the news. So this news can be a weather-related item. And San Diego, too. San Diego weather guys and news. It's always sunny there. All right, my man. I think that's going to do it for us here. Just a Monday edition. So a couple plays for everyone. But we were able to break down a large portion of the entire slate. We'll be here all week, Monday through Friday, betting weekly hardball, 2 p.m. Eastern, 11 a.m. Pacific. And as we mentioned a moment ago, or at the top of the show, I should say, Sarah and I will be betting weekly fast break to discuss the WNBA game slate tonight, which is only 2 games on the docket. We also got some futures, whether it be the awards or adjusted win total. So a lot of good stuff. And, plenty of content from both Albert and me throughout the week. So we want to thank everyone for tuning in. For Albert Nguyen, everyone behind the scenes who does all the heavy lifting, making us look good. I'm Doug Kezirian. Best of luck out there with your wagers, and we'll see you back here tomorrow.